I used to laugh at horror stories online, the ones about cursed houses, black-eyed children, shadow figures. Yeah, I thought they were all made up for views. I'm not laughing anymore. I wish I never moved into that apartment. It was late 2021 when I moved to a cheap place downtown. I had just broken up with my girlfriend. My job had gone remote and I was desperate for space to start over. The ad said studio unit, top floor, quiet neighborhood. It was cheap, clean, and the landlord barely asked questions. Maybe that should have been my first red flag. The building was old, like 1940s old. The hallway smelled like wet plaster and bleach. The walls were that faded yellow color that comes from decades of cigarette smoke. And every time I walked, the floorboards creaked like they were whispering to each other. But I didn't care. I had my own space again. For the first week, everything was fine. I worked, slept, ate instant noodles, and listened to podcasts until I fell asleep. But after a few nights, something strange started happening. It began subtle, like I could hear faint scratching sounds above me just over the ceiling near the bed. At first, I thought it was rats. The building was old, so that made sense. But when I mentioned it to the landlord, he sighed and said, "There's nothing up there, trust me. Roof's sealed. No crawl space, no crawl space." I remember that clearly because it didn't make sense. There was clearly something hollow between the ceiling and roof. I could hear the scurrying. That night, I tried to ignore it. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound so specific that I'll never forget it. Tap, 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 like fingers brushing across drywall. Slow, deliberate, moving right above me. I sat up, holding my phone flashlight, staring at the ceiling. The tapping stopped immediately. Dead silent. I waited for 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. When I finally laid back down, the sound started again, but closer. I moved my bed the next day, away from that corner. The noise followed. By the fourth night, I was sleeping with earbuds in. That helped for a while, but then the smell started. A sour metallic scent like pennies and rotten meat. It came from the same spot on the ceiling. The plaster above my bed started to bubble slightly as if there was moisture or something trapped inside. I texted my landlord again. He didn't respond. That evening, I brought in a chair and tried pressing on the ceiling spot. The plaster was soft, almost like damp cardboard. My fingers came away sticky with a reddish-brown smear. I actually gagged. I went to grab paper towels, but when I came back, the spot was dry. Clean, like nothing had ever been there. I told myself I was overtired. I even Googled mold hallucinations to convince myself it was psychological. But that night, something happened that made me realize this was not in my head. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up because something fell onto my blanket. It wasn't heavy, maybe the size of a rat, but warm, wet. I screamed and threw it off, fumbling for the light. When I finally turned it on, there was nothing there, no stain, no object. Just my sheets bunched up. But the ceiling had a hole now, about the size of a grapefruit right above the bed. The plaster edges were jagged, curling inward. Inside, the darkness looked too deep. I stood there, trembling, because I could swear I saw something pull back, deeper into that hole, something pale and jointed. I moved my bed to the other side of the room and didn't sleep that night. By morning, the hole was gone. Not repaired. Gone. The plaster looked solid, seamless. I even took a photo to compare it with the night before, but the pictures didn't match. The hole didn't show in the photo at all. That's when I realized something was playing with me. Days passed. The noises changed, less scurrying, more breathing. You know that sound when someone exhales softly against a wall? Like faint condensation? I could hear that sometimes behind the light fixtures or vents. I stopped turning off the lights completely. I started sleeping in my chair near the door. But even there, I'd wake up freezing. The temperature would drop sharply between 2 and 3 a.m. I'd see my breath fog in front of me while the rest of the apartment stayed warm. Then one night, it spoke, not words, more like mimicry. At around 3:15 a.m., I heard my own voice whisper, "Don't look up." It came from directly above. I ran out of the apartment barefoot, down 5 flights of stairs, and didn't come back until daylight. I told the landlord everything. He just looked at me blankly and said, "You shouldn't be up there that late, that was all." No emotion. No surprise, that day I started packing. I didn't care about the lease. I just wanted out. But when I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, I noticed something that stopped me cold. In the corner of the ceiling above the mirror, right where the wall met the plaster, was a small, wet handprint, tiny, Child-sized, it dripped once, leaving a faint red trail down the tile. I left that same hour. I moved in with my cousin for a few weeks. I didn't sleep properly, always expecting to hear that slow tapping again. I tried to forget, but a month later, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to drive past the building one last time. It was boarded up. The front windows were smashed, and there was police tape across the entrance. I asked a shopkeeper next door what happened. He said, "They found a man up there, dead for weeks. The roof had caved in and he was stuck between the beams. He didn't know how long the body had been there, but the thing that made my stomach turn was when he said, 'Funny thing, people complained for months before that. Said they heard scratching in the walls. Guess no one thought to check the ceiling.' I thanked him and left. That night I dreamt I was back in that room. The hole was open again, wider this time. I could see the beams and insulation. And something else, something pale, hairless, crawling upside down, whispering in my voice. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding. I looked up at the ceiling above my cousin's couch. There in the paint was a small wet handprint. When I first moved to the city for college, I thought I'd found the perfect setup. A cheap 2-bedroom apartment only 10 minutes from campus, a decent neighborhood, and a roommate who seemed totally normal. His name was Eli. Quiet, polite, kept to himself. Exactly the kind of person I wanted to live with. I met him through a student housing group online. His ad was simple: room for rent. Must be clean, responsible, and okay with occasional night shifts. The photos looked fine. A small but clean space with white walls, basic furniture, and a view of the street. When I moved in, Eli helped carry my boxes. He was pale, tall, maybe mid-20s with dark hair and the kind of soft voice that made everything sound calm. He said he was finishing his degree but also worked nights at a nearby hospital. That explained why I didn't see him much. For the first 2 weeks, things were great. I went to classes, came home, studied, and sometimes heard Eli's door close in the early mornings when he got back from work. He always left the apartment spotless. The only odd thing was that he locked his bedroom door whenever he left, even if just to grab the mail. But I figured that was normal. People value privacy. The first time something felt off was on a Thursday night. I was pulling an all-nighter for an exam, half asleep over my laptop, when I heard what sounded like footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, dragging. That wouldn't have been weird, except Eli wasn't supposed to be home. I'd seen him leave earlier with his scrubs and backpack. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Then came a soft knock, 3 times. "Eli?" I called out, no response. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. But I swear I saw the shadow of someone turning the corner into Eli's room, except his door was still closed. I stood there listening for a while, my heart pounding. Eventually, I convinced myself I imagined it and went back to studying. But from that night onward, I kept hearing noises when Eli wasn't supposed to be home. Faint creaks, muffled thumps, something brushing against the walls. Sometimes I'd catch a smell from under his door, like old copper and damp clothes. When I asked Eli about it the next morning, he looked genuinely confused. "I didn't get home until 5, he said. "Maybe it's the plumbing. This place is old." He smiled, but something about the way he said it didn't sit right. A few days later, I realized something else strange. I'd never actually seen Eli leave the apartment. I'd hear the front door open, hear his keys, but whenever I looked up from my desk or walked into the hall, he was just gone. Then one night I came home late from class and found the apartment dark. Usually Eli left a light on in the kitchen, but this time everything was pitch black. I turned on the hall light and froze. Eli's door was wide open. It was the first time I'd ever seen inside. The room looked nothing like I expected. The walls were covered with torn-out photographs, all taped in uneven rows. Some were normal, and people smiling, city streets, landscapes, but most were of the same person. A man. Mid-20s. Blonde. Sometimes smiling, sometimes asleep, sometimes standing in doorways. There were hundreds of them. I took one off the wall. It wasn't printed, it was Polaroid film. Fresh. In the corner of the photo, in small, shaky writing, it said, "He doesn't know I'm watching." I dropped it and backed out of the room. That's when I saw something else, a narrow closet door slightly ajar in the corner. A faint rustling came from inside. I called out, "Eli!" The rustling stopped. Then I heard the floor creak like someone shifting their weight slowly forward. I bolted out of there. I spent the night at a friend's dorm and came back the next morning, shaking but trying to tell myself maybe it was part of a project or something. But when I opened the front door, all of Eli's stuff was gone. His room was empty. Walls bare. No photos, no clothes, no bed sheets, nothing. I called him. His number was disconnected. I emailed him. The message bounced. The landlord came by a few days later to check the heating, and I asked him about Eli. He frowned and said, "Eli who?" I explained, and he said, "You must have the wrong name. That unit's been empty since last year." I thought he was joking, but when I showed him my lease, the one with Eli's name on it, he shook his head. "That's not our signature, and we don't rent through email." My stomach dropped. He opened the building's tenant file for me, and sure enough, the last renter before me was a man named Mark Donovan, not Eli. I went back upstairs and searched every inch of that apartment. Everything looked normal, except for a loose tile in the bathroom wall behind the sink. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a small black box taped shut. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were more Polaroids, but these were of me, sleeping, eating, leaving for class. All taken from inside the apartment. Some were dated before I even moved in. The final photo was from the previous night. I was sitting at my desk studying, wearing the same clothes I had on now. The caption read, "He doesn't know I'm still here." I left that apartment immediately. I didn't take anything except my laptop and wallet. I called the police, showed them the photos, and explained everything. They took the box and said they'd investigate. But a week later, I got a call from the detective. They'd run fingerprints on the photos in the box. They all matched one person, a Mark Donovan, the same name as the tenant who had lived there before me. The detective said Mark had gone missing in 2019. They never found him. But his landlord at the time said something weird, that Mark always complained about a man living in his walls. They said it was probably mental illness. I've moved 4 times since then. I don't tell this story often, because people just assume I was dreaming or that I made it up. But last night, while unpacking a box in my new place, I found something that made me feel sick. Under my towels was a Polaroid. It wasn't mine. It showed me standing by the window looking out, and on the bottom, in shaky handwriting, it said, "He found me again." I used to work as an emergency dispatcher for a small-town police department in Northern Oregon. It was a stressful but manageable job. Long hours, strange calls, a lot of drunk people, and noise complaints. But there's one night I can't shake. Even now, years later, I still hear her voice. It was February 2020. Snow was coming down hard and we were understaffed. I was on the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, manning one of the phone lines alone while my supervisor slept in the break room. Around 2:30 a.m. I got a call that would ruin me. It started with silence. Then faintly I heard breathing. "Wevin, what's your emergency?" I said. The breathing got shakier, almost panicked. Then a whisper, "Please." "He's inside." I straightened up instantly. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm." "What's your address?" She whispered again. "He's inside the house. I can hear him moving." Her voice sounded fragile, terrified, and young, maybe early 20s. I asked again for the address. She hesitated, then whispered, 1283 Mayflower Lane. I typed it in and froze. That address had been flagged before, once about 6 months earlier. I remembered because it was listed as abandoned. No residents, no active utilities. I asked, "Are you sure that's your address?" "Yes," she said, more frantically now. "I just moved in last week." "Please, he's in the hallway." I could hear floorboards creaking through the phone. A door hinge groaned. "Okay, listen carefully," I said. "Go to a room you can lock. Stay quiet. Don't hang up." I signaled for patrol to respond to Mayflower Lane. They were 10 minutes out. "Can you tell me your name?" I asked softly. "Lena," she whispered. "Please hurry." I heard something slam, maybe a door, followed by her muffled sobbing. Then a second sound like footsteps approaching. "Lena, are you somewhere safe?" No response, just her breathing. Then, faintly, I heard a man's voice, low, muted, saying something I couldn't make out. I strained to listen. The voice said, "I told you not to answer." "Who is that?" I asked. "Lena?" The line went dead. I tried calling back immediately. No answer. The patrol unit arrived at the address about 12 minutes later. The house was completely dark. No lights, no movement, and according to the officers, no signs of anyone living there. They forced the door open. Dust everywhere, cobwebs, broken windows. The power meter was disconnected. But here's the part that still makes me sweat when I think about it. One of the officers found a phone in the middle of the living room floor, an old corded landline, disconnected from the wall. The receiver was off the hook. They said the phone wasn't even plugged in. I checked the caller ID log and the number Lena had called from was listed as 00000. No trace. No billing info, no carrier. Just blank. We wrote it off as a hoax. Maybe a board kit or a glitch in the system. I tried to move on, but about 3 nights later it happened again. Same time. Same sound. Same voice. This time she whispered, "Please, don't send them." I froze. "Lena, is that you?"
"Please," she said, voice trembling.
"He gets angry when you send them." I stared at the monitor, every nerve in my body on edge. "Who gets angry?" I asked. The line hissed softly, like static. Then the same man's voice came through again, clearer this time. "Stop calling here." Then it clicked off. We traced the signal again. Still nothing. The line didn't exist. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying her voice, the desperation, the fear. A week later, I pulled the old case file for the previous report at 1283 Mayflower. Back then, in 2014, neighbors had called about screams from the same house. When police went inside, they found signs someone had been squatting there. Blankets, food cans, a few photos burned at the edges, but no people. One of the reports mentioned a disconnected landline sitting on the kitchen counter. The same model we'd found years later. I tried not to obsess, but I couldn't stop. Every night I kept expecting the call, and then exactly a month later it came again. Same voice, but this time she sounded calm, almost serene. "Hi," she said softly. "Lena, you don't have to send anyone this time," she said. "He's gone." "Who's gone?" "The man in the hall. He finally left." Something about her tone chilled me. It wasn't relief. It was emptiness. "Where are you right now?" I asked. She paused, then said, "Home. Can you confirm your address?" The line crackled faintly. "You already know." Then, faintly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, like someone walking across the dispatch floor. But I was alone. I turned in my chair. The office was empty. When I looked back at the screen, the call had ended itself. No button press. No disconnection. Just gone. Later that morning, I checked the call log again. There was no record of any call that night. The next week, patrol reported that the Mayflower house had finally been demolished. I thought that would be the end of it. But 3 nights later, around 3 a.m., the line rang again. Same number, 00000. I almost didn't answer, but I did. And this time, there was no voice. Just a faint rhythmic sound, like someone tapping the receiver against something wooden. Tap, tap, tap. Then, after about 10 seconds, a whisper. "Why did you take the house away?" I slammed the phone down. I reported it. Tech ran diagnostics. They said the call wasn't possible. The line had been physically disconnected from the network for over a week. I requested a transfer after that. They moved me to desk duty for a few months, but I couldn't focus. The sound of ringing phones made me nauseous. Eventually, I quit altogether and moved 2 towns over. For a while, things were normal again. I started sleeping through the night. I even stopped thinking about the call. Then, about 6 months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was an old gray landline phone. The cord was frayed. The receiver was cracked. There was a note taped to it that said, "It still rings for you." I threw it out that same day. But 2 nights ago, my cell phone rang at exactly 2:33 a.m. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, and all I heard was breathing, soft, shaky, then a familiar whisper. "Please." "He's inside." I hung up, shaking so hard I dropped the phone. I tried to call the number back, but it came up as 00000. My phone's been acting weird ever since. Random static, phantom vibrations. Sometimes in the middle of the night, the screen lights up on its own. Incoming call. Always that same number. Last night, I let it ring. I didn't answer, but it kept going for hours. And now I swear I can hear it, faintly from the basement. There's no phone down there. At least there didn't used to be.